Good evening, and welcome to the Facts and Myths of Detoxification with Steven Horne and Thomas Easley. I'm actually down at Thomas's house, so we're both down in Andalusia, Alabama. So, well, greetings from the South, and let's get started with talking a little bit about one of the subjects that's really popular in herbalism and natural healing, but a lot of the information that goes around about it is not really correct. Thomas, why don't you get started and just...
Yeah. So the question is, why should we detoxify? What are we detoxifying from? And the facts are that companies worldwide produce 6.5 trillion pounds of 9,000 different chemicals each year. That's enough to fill an ocean supertanker of chemicals. And they release 7 billion pounds of 650 different pollutants into the atmosphere and the water. A recent study by the Environmental Working Group found that the average person has over 91 toxic chemicals in their body, including toxins that have been proven to cause brain damage, nervous system damage, and cancer. They also found 200 industrial compounds, pollutants, and other chemicals in the umbilical cords of 10 newborn babies. So, it starts at birth. We are being exposed to massive amounts of man-made toxins that our bodies just weren't designed to deal with.
The human body is made up of about 100 trillion cells, but in our intestines, we actually have 10 times that many microorganisms. So in other words, we have more bacteria and yeast and single-celled organisms living in our intestinal tract than we have cells in our body. And these friendly bacteria are really critical to the health of our body. They break down undigested foods by fermentation. They produce vitamins such as biotin and vitamin K, and they also help to produce hormones that help regulate fat storage. So the colon is really, really critical to health, and it's part of the body's first line of immune defense. Thomas?
Yeah, so we need to get to know the colon to really understand this process. When we're born, our gut is sterile. It has no bacteria in it. And we receive our first inoculation of bacteria from the vaginal canal of our mother, and then we continue to add bacteria to our gut through the contact with our environment. If you're breastfeeding, then you get bacteria that are naturally on the breast. If you aren't born vaginally and you don't breastfeed, you still get bacteria, but the composition of that bacteria varies greatly if you aren't, if your mother has a cesarean surgery performed and you don't breastfeed. So the gut bacteria really starts in the instant of birth and just develops from there.
And one of the interesting things about breastfeeding is the white blood cells in the immune system actually pluck lactobacillus bacteria from the gut and carry them to the breast to put them into breast milk to inoculate the infant with friendly bacteria. That's how important this process is. Now, we've talked that this is like facts and myths, so let's talk about some of the myths that there are about detoxification. And the biggest myth out there is that your colon is encrusted with fecal matter, that you have this coating of goo lining your intestinal tract that you've got to slough off, that it's going to kill you, and that there's like 10 to 20 pounds of fecal matter in your colon rotting as we speak. So there's all this stuff, and therefore you got to do all these cleanses, lots and lots of cleanses, very frequently detoxifying in order to be healthy. It's also kind of, there are some people out there who act like cleansing is the solution to all your healing problems. In fact, being kind of introduced into this whole realm of natural healing in Utah, this was a really common theme through a lot of folk people in Utah, is cleanse, 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 cleanse. And part of the whole mystique of this is that if you're stimulating elimination, that is, you're making yourself poop and pee more, that's cleansing. And that's really not what this is all about. Thomas?
Yes, so the way that they do this is what I consider scare tactics. They frighten people into thinking that if you don't do this colon cleanse, you're going to die because, John Wayne had hundreds of pounds of fecal matter in his gut when he was, when he died, and all these, they show pictures of megacolons and big wads of stuff that comes out in the toilet. And the fact is, some of the steps involved in colon cleansing, like increasing, fiber and improving your diet, are really good for you. Some things, like the recommendations of laxatives, especially to people that don't need them, are really not good for you. Real detoxification is about healing the organs of elimination, and it requires lots of nutrition. If you excessively stimulate elimination, you can drain your energy, which can make you weaker and ultimately sicker. I have seen people that have taken this to such extremes that literally they fasted and cleansed themselves to death. It's the saddest, thing that I probably have seen in natural healing is, this obsession with cleansing that ultimately leads people to damaging their health and worse.
Yeah, I had a case years ago that was a prime example of what you're talking about, where my midwife friend asked me to come see someone, and this lady, kind of the case history is she had started out on a mild food diet, which is eating pretty much fruits and vegetables and no other heavy foods, kind of the whole in Wigmore kind of thing, which I think can be beneficial for a short period of time. But anyway, she had done that, and she'd felt a little better, and then she started to feel worse, and the people who were working with her kept telling, well, this is a healing crisis, just stick with it, just keep doing it, and she was taking detoxifying herbs and everything, and she actually had gone into a seizure. And when my midwife friend had taken her to the hospital, she had extremely low levels of mineral electrolytes in her blood. And so when I walked in to see her, this woman was skin and bones. She was pale, she was pasty, she was weak, she was anemic, she was thin. And I remember I looked at her and I thought, what have you got left to cleanse? You've gotten rid of everything. You need to build, lady. You need to get some good nutrition. You need some chicken soup, for heaven's sakes. And I checked her, and she had some digestive weakness, and I put her on some digestive enzymes, and I told her to go back to eating some normal food and so forth, and she immediately from that point started to get well. So you can cleanse yourself to the point of actually making yourself extremely sick.
Well, these pictures are a really good illustrator of where these myths come from, and they would be easy to misinterpret. You see something gross like that and you think, oh my God, that was inside me for years and I've got to get rid of this by cleansing regularly, but that's just not the case. So Stephen, where do these ooey gooey gross things come from?
Yeah, well, years ago I worked for Nature Sunshine Products, and Mark Pedersen, who was the chemist in their research and development department, was working on a problem that some people, when they took capsules of comfrey and pepsin, that basically they would what he called torpedo them. It was like the capsule came out like with what looked like a capsule, only a lot bigger, swollen up, and just went through the intestinal tract. And doing some experimentation, he found that certain kinds of chemicals would actually make the mucilaginous fiber in the comfrey swell up, darken, and basically create this little gooey gel-like mass. So what he hypothesized, and it seems to make a lot of sense to me, is that the body was interacting with chemicals probably in the digestive tract and very likely coming out of the liver, the bile in the liver, that when they hit the fiber, the mucilaginous fibers, like in the psyllium and other fibers that people are taking on these cleanse, that the fiber absorbed these materials, turned into this gooey, slimy mess, and basically this is what you're seeing is being passed. And I've seen that happen. People do not pass this stuff taking laxatives. They only pass this stuff when they're taking mucilaginous fibers, which show that this stuff is actually being caused by the interaction of the mucilaginous fiber and materials in their gut. Now, the interesting thing is that as you continue to take the fiber, this stuff stops coming out, which suggests that there is a detoxification mechanism going on, meaning that something is being absorbed by the fiber and carried out of the body, but this is not coming off the lining of your colon. We're talking about a biochemical, microscopic thing taking place, not a gross mechanical thing.
So we've explained what this ooey gooey stuff is, but how can we convince people that a colon is not totally encrusted? Ah, okay. So this is a picture of a colon from a colonoscopy, and I don't see any ooey gooey stuff in there. What you see is a nice pink, healthy colored tissue. And you can see the cartilage that holds it apart, and you can see the muscles. You know, the fact is that if our colons had a lining of encrusted, hardened fecal matter, like I and many other people were originally taught, we die because it's through the colon that water is absorbed into the rest of the system. So
Yeah.
there's nothing blocking your colon from absorbing water and nutrients across the barrier. There's no encrusted fecal matter.
Yeah, and all they have to do to get the colon to clear out like this is basically give the person a purgative, a really strong laxative, and it empties everything out of the colon, and there is nothing left in the colon when they do the colonoscopy. And so medical doctors, in shoving those little cameras up people's behinds, never see this thing, and if it was there, that would obviously make it show up.
Okay, so you know, on our left, what you have is a colon with, it actually looks like the end of the colon with a sphincter, a little closing towards the end, but you see the nice coloring of the colon. Actually, there's a little bit of discoloration on the left-hand picture, which could be from taking laxatives, but overall, nice blood supply, nice pink color. If you look at the right, the closest we get to gunk in the colon is these pockets. Okay, and this is where the lining of the gut has weakened and ballooned out, and these pockets are called diverticuli. And if they get stuff in them, and they become infected, you have what's known as diverticulitis, and you know, that's it causes pain and inflammation, typically in the lower left side around the inside of the hip bone. But what we see here is not encrusted fecal matter. What we see is the occasional ballooned out pocket, and later on in the class we're going to talk about how to deal with some of these diverticuli. But you know, we really wanted to show you some pictures here so that you would see what a healthy colon looks like, and this person has not underwent a cleanse and they didn't have encrusted fecal matter.
So the real problem here is actually damage to the intestinal mucosa. That is, if you looked at that tissue, that tissue that's lining your colon and your digestive tract, and also that lines your lungs, it's called mucous membranes, is an inner skin. It's an inner lining to the body. And just like you can damage your skin and get an inflammatory process going on your skin that creates an opening that allows for material to get into your body, you can damage your intestinal mucosa and create inflammation in there that's going to cause problems. And the intestinal mucosa is damaged due to drugs and chemicals. It can also be damaged by stress, or it can be damaged by causing damage to the gut microflora, to the little critters that are living in your gut. So here's a quote from the Journal of Science. The gut epithelium acts as the gatekeeper of mucosal immunity, forming a link between the innate and adaptive immune systems. And it's from keeping the gut microflora at bay. So what happens is that entire lining of the intestinal tract is colonized with something called a biofilm, meaning a filmy little colonization of microbes. And this filmy little colonization of microbes forms a bridge between what's called your innate immune system, which your innate immune system is not targeted to any particular disease. Your adaptive immune system creates chemicals to, like, target a specific pathogen, a specific virus, or a specific bacteria, or so forth. But your innate immune system basically gobbles up anything that doesn't look right. And there's a link, this intestinal mucosa helps form a link between those two, and actually helps to regulate that thing. Now, someone just made a comment. The black stuff in the picture you showed are from Dr. Bernard Jensen's book. Therefore, you're saying these pictures are not correct. The pictures are correct. That stuff does come out on a cleanse. I've done cleanses, and that stuff does come out. What we're saying is that stuff was not on the lining of the colon. That was not adhered to or crusted to the lining of the colon. What we're looking at is a phenomenon where the fiber and the material used in the cleanse interacting with the chemicals in the body and whatever, and in the process of absorbing whatever it's absorbing out of the gut or out of the bile or out of the digestive tracts, is turning into that goo. And that over a period of time, as you continue to take fiber, whatever it is that is causing that gets cleaned out of the body and it stops. It's not that the cleanse doesn't work. It's that the explanation being used as to what the cleanse is doing is inaccurate. And when we make statements that are inaccurate, then it makes natural medicine look stupid in the eyes of the medical profession and people who actually know better. So we need to understand that, then, as we're going to explain tonight, that cleansing and detoxification is valid, but we need to upgrade the way we explain cleansing and be able to explain it in a way that is more scientifically accurate. Okay, so really, go ahead, Thomas.
Yes, so colon cleansing really should be called colon healing. It's not about having more bowel movements, although having regular bowel movements are important. It's really about restoring health to the gastrointestinal tract.
Go ahead.
So how do you know if you have gut inflammation? Okay, how do you know if you need to heal your gut? It's really simple. If you happen to be breathing at this moment, and in America or pretty much any other industrialized country, you probably have some gut inflammation. Okay. If you have taken any antibiotics, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, or steroids within the last year or 2 or 3, depending on the person, if you don't eat fermented foods every day, chances are you have some gut inflammation. Luckily, it's fairly easy to reduce this gut inflammation and really, accomplish the purposes of cleansing, which is better health. And we do that through some of these processes we're going to be talking about that heal the gut.
So, courtesy of Thomas, we have here a nice picture of a person that's got a reddish colored tongue. You can see that underneath that heavy white mucousy coat, the tongue is kind of a little bit red. It's not a healthy pink color, which is a sign of a lot of heat and inflammation in the system. And that heavy mucus coating on the tongue is a sign that the system is congested. Now, especially the back of the tongue represents is a reflective area of the gut. And so especially if you see a very heavy coating at the back of the tongue, you probably really need to do some work on your digestive tract. Also, if you have any diagnosed inflammatory bowel disorders, any vaginal yeast infections or signs of thrush, if you have bloating after meals, suffer food allergies, or suffer chronic sinus and respiratory congestion, these are all good indications that you probably need to do some healing to your gut.
So there are a couple of medical tests that you can do to test for inflammation of the gut or leaky gut. One of them is an intestinal permeability test, and basically what happens is they have a person consume 2 non-digestible sugars, lactulose and mannitol, and these sugars aren't absorbed into the bloodstream. Okay, a urine sample is then collected to and examined to determine the content of the 2 sugars. Okay? And the other is a CDSA, or a comprehensive digestive stool analysis. And that's where they use microscopes and antibody testing to determine the presence of parasites, levels of beneficial flora, good bacteria, bad bacteria, you know, if you have any pathogenic bacteria that could be creating gut inflammation, if you have an excess of yeast, and yeast is important in the gut. It works in combination with your bacteria to help digest foods and to produce some vitamins. So we want some yeast in the gut. We don't want a lot more yeast than bacteria. And the CDSA can also, through antibody testing, determine some common food allergies. So if you don't want to use the indications from the last slide, you know, of being alive in America or having a swollen tongue that's coated and red, you know, there are medical tests out there. If you'll find a good doctor that can, you know, can run these tests, you can have it scientifically proven that you have gut inflammation.
By the way, we just got corrected that the quotation we had is not from the Journal of Science, it's just from Science magazine. They looked it up online. So if anybody wants to look that up. So let's talk about actually what needs to happen to have a healthy gut, and also just basically what needs to happen to detoxify and heal the gut. And we'll start with the most important thing for detoxification, and the thing that most people just don't think about enough and don't do enough, and that is hydrating their body, getting adequate amounts of water into their system. Many, if not pretty much most laxatives, work by basically hydrating the stool. When the process of digestion takes a considerable amount of water, which is poured onto the food through the digestive secretions of the stomach and also from the pancreas and the bile from the liver. And in order to liquefy the food and turn it into a semi-liquid colloidal mass called chyme. And so when the body is finished doing the absorption in the small intestines, the body wants to recycle of as much of that water as it possibly can. So it recycles it in the colon. If there is a shortage of water in the body, meaning the body is dehydrated, the colon absorbs as much water as it possibly can, which dries out the stool and basically makes you constipated. So a lot of our laxatives basically work by inhibiting the body's ability to absorb water and the mineral electrolytes that move the water, like magnesium and potassium salts, in the body. Now what that does is it makes the body more dehydrated, so the body tries harder to absorb water from the colon, and you get into sort of a vicious cycle of dehydration. So this is why the first thing that you should do to basically get your elimination systems working better is to basically drink plenty of water. The water also activates a neurotransmitter called motilin that actually acts as a natural laxative. And of course, since you don't want to be putting more chemicals in your body, you should, you know, purify your water in some way or another.
So how can you tell if somebody's not drinking enough water? You have to ask clients, I find, very specifically how much water they drink, and then go back and ask them how much other things they drink. And if the number adds up to be way too big, you know, if somebody says, oh, I drink 10 glasses of water a day, I also drink 6 sodas and 4 glasses of tea, chances are they don't drink that much fluid. So you have to then go back and say, well, that sure is a lot of soda, and it really doesn't count as water, and neither does, coffee and tea. So you have to, I find, really grill people sometimes, because a lot of people are so embarrassed that they don't drink any water that they lie on their intake forms. So even if they write down 8 glasses of water, I go back and ask more specifically about exactly what they drink, what type of water, what other, juices, sodas, coffees, teas, things like that. Also, ask the person, do they feel thirsty? Do they have hard, dry stools? Are they straining to pass their stool? Do they have infrequent bowel eliminations? Does their skin lack flexibility? Is their tongue dry? I mean, there are all types of questions that you can ask pertaining to dehydration that are really important, because this is the most important thing you can probably do for your overall health.
Okay, step 2 for gut health is to increase the amount of dietary fiber. Fiber is important for several reasons. One is that it reduces colon transit time. That is, it makes things move through the intestinal tract more quickly, so that you get better motility of the digestive tract. It bulks up the stool, and it also helps to lubricate the stool. So the fibers, especially what are called the water-soluble fibers, not the things we think of as roughage, like the bran and the high-fiber bread that's got basically cellulose in it, which is just nothing but purified sawdust pulp. We're talking about the kinds of fibers that are typically found in fruits and vegetables, like mucilage, gums, and pectins. These fibers are long chains of sugar molecules that our body doesn't have the capacity with enzymes to break down. And so these fibers absorb water, which swells up, bulks out the stool. The pressure of that bulking against the intestines helps to give you a feeling of fullness, and also gives stimulus to the intestines to move things forward, as well as holding on to some water to help keep the stool moist. Now, the fiber also absorbs irritants. It latches on to things that may be toxic or irritating to the body, and it particularly will latch on to things that the liver is dumping from the bile. And we'll talk a little bit about liver detoxification a little bit later in here, but that helps to keep those things from being reabsorbed in the intestinal tract, and helps to carry them out of the body. And most people in our society do not get an adequate amount of fiber, and this is one of the main reasons why they have unhealthy guts, besides the inflammation.
Stephen, I can't believe you don't like to eat sawdust powder. It's just so tasty.
Oh, I know, it's yummy, cheap, you know.
Right? So you're going to have a lack of fiber if you have the standard American diet. If you have signs and symptoms of intestinal inflammation and irritation, you're probably lacking fiber. If you have a slow colon transit time, you're going to be lacking in fiber. It's especially good for elderly, weak, and feeble people with gut problems. If fiber causes gas and bloating, use with enzymes or aromatic herbs like ginger. Now, I don't think we've discussed this, Stephen, but I really prefer that people get their fiber from healthy fruits and vegetables. Do you like some of the fiber supplements out there, or do you like fruits and vegetables? What do you think?
Well, I do believe that the best way to get fiber is to increase your intake of fruits and vegetables, because you're also increasing your intake of antioxidants and getting good quality carbohydrates instead of some of the other things people are doing. But I do think a lot of people need to take a little extra of a fiber supplement sometimes, to counteract the fact that they don't always eat that. So I actually tend to do a little better if I'm not eating the fruits and vegetables, if I take a little bit of a fiber supplement. But of course, the best way to do it is fruits and vegetables.
So fruits and vegetables for health, a little fiber supplement for insurance.
Right. Someone asked about the grams of day, and as I understand it, it's about 50 grams a day of what the research shows that you need of fiber, which is quite a bit more. The average person, I think, gets about 15 to 20 grams of fiber, which is less than half of what's optimal. And research shows that native people who usually eat 50 grams of fiber or more a day, because they eat a lot of of coarse plant foods have no colon cancer and no inflammatory bowel problems and so forth, and this is part of the reason why they don't have those problems. Okay, Thomas, why don't you talk about the probiotics?
Okay, so probiotics are your healthy bacteria in your gut, primarily composed of various lactobacillus species, and they help to break down undigested foodstuffs in the intestines. So if what you've chewed up and what your enzymes have not broken down, that's where these probiotics come in hand. They improve the intestinal absorption of nutrients. Probiotics actually have a mild laxative action, and they're found traditionally in fermented foods, which also contain beneficial enzymes, some different acid combinations, lactic acids and things like that. So in fermented foods, what happens is your lactobacillus bacteria break sugars and carbohydrates down into lactic acid and reproduce in the process. And this picture is of kimchi, which is probably my favorite fermented food. I have at various times fermented wide ranges of things. I've fermented okra and kimchis and sauerkrauts, and I've also fermented wines and, made wines out of fermenting grapes and figs, and there are lots of ways to get in good yeast and bacteria, and most of them are through foods that most Americans just don't eat.
Okay. So, hey, why don't you continue and talk about this, because this is the book you put in here.
Yeah, so this is my favorite book on fermenting. It's called Wild Fermentation, and if I remember the author's story correctly, she was actually diagnosed with AIDS and used fermented foods to reverse her diagnosis, and is, 10 years later healthy and doesn't have the antibodies that they used to test for the HIV virus. And she basically lived on fermented foods, including unpasteurized yogurt, sour creams, buttermilks, kefirs. You can ferment pretty much any vegetable. When you ferment cabbage, you get sauerkraut, and when you add peppers to it, you ferment Chinese cabbage, you get kimchi. Kvases, which are a yeast fermentation, apple cider vinegars, which are a bacterial fermentation. Some unpasteurized beers and wines have good bacteria. Sour pickles, miso, tempeh, dosas, cultured cheeses, even sourdough breads. And some people go so far as to let meats spoil and, well, not spoil, but let meats ferment, which gives them a really, really unusual taste that most people can't stomach. And all of these things feed the bacteria in your gut. So if you've never tried making your own sauerkraut, pick up a copy of Wild Fermentation, give it a read, and see how you feel after introducing some fermented foods into your diet.
I had a couple listeners say that the she is a he, that Sandor is a he. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Anyway,
it's been a while since I read the introduction.
Someone also said that there's a website for this, wildfermentation.com. But if you do read Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon, you'll find out that that in any culture where there was more cooked food being eaten, people would eat more fermented foods. Okay, now let's talk about some strategies for gut health. Now let's first of all talk about the whole idea of using bitters. And bitters are what are typically used in detoxification formulas besides fiber to help clean out the body, so to speak. And bitters have a number of properties that are very helpful for assisting the health of the gastrointestinal tract in the gut. For one thing, bitters tend to stimulate digestive secretions. So the origin of eating bitter greens prior to the meal as a salad comes because it actually makes digestion work better, including it improves bile flow, And many of the compounds in bitter herbs support the ability of the liver to detoxify chemicals, and bitters are also used to clear that stagnation. Now, a couple of people missed with the thing on the tongue, where you have that heavy white coating on the tongue. That is stagnation. That is congestion in the body, and that is a good indication that bitters are needed to clear out that congestion and stagnation. Think of it as a swampy environment in the body that needs to be kind of drained and moved out. In fact, speaking of tongues, Thomas.
Yeah, so this is a pretty, if you look towards the back of the tongue, it has this heavier coating, and then there's actually missing a patch of coating down the center, which is indicative of heat burning off the fluids, basically. So this person has a good bit of intestinal inflammation. It's also a fairly meaty tongue, especially towards the back and center. You get a little scallop mark on the person's left-hand side. A swollen or scalloped tongue is also indicative of somebody that needs to use bitters and alteratives to kind of move those fluids around, do some gentle cleansing. Some other indications for using bitters and cleansing is just anybody that has chronic respiratory congestion or swollen lymph nodes, acid indigestion starting about an hour after eating is actually from low stomach acid, not from too much stomach acid, and bitters help to stimulate hydrochloric acid in the stomach. If you get any foul belching or sour regurgitation, that means that you're not digesting things well, and bitters are a really good way to improve that digestion. If you get indigestion, especially from eating fats and proteins, then you probably don't have enough hydrochloric acid or bile to break those down, and that's what's causing the belching. And something as simple as eating a little dandelion green or arugula before your meal can provide enough bitter stimulation to remedy that.
So bitters can be warming or cooling, but when you see a tongue like this one, where the tongue is very, in contrast to being swollen, or is very shriveled, a lot of fissures and wrinkles and so forth, this person is dried out. And since bitters are drying, it's not a good idea for someone who's also already dried out or suffering from an atrophied or dried state in their body to be giving them a lot of cleansing bitters. It actually will weaken them further, and instead they need very sweet, nourishing tonics. And in answer to somebody says, question, can you give some examples of bitter herbs? Here are some examples of some really good bitters. And these are ideally taken in a liquid form prior to meals. They do not work as well for digestion in capsules. In fact, I would say that their effectiveness is probably reduced by about 80%. Wouldn't you think, Thomas?
Yeah, I think encapsulated, they can still work on the liver, but I don't think they work on the stomach and, hydrochloric acid at all when taken encapsulated.
Yeah, so you lose a lot of the benefits when you're unwilling to actually take them. So there's a tradition of using bitter tonics, which is typically some bitters mixed with some nice stimulating aromatics. One of the most famous one is Swedish bitters, but there's a lot of different formulas like that you can take. I know David Winston's his DOPA formula, dandelion, orange peel, and angelica, plus a few other things. But basically you take a little bit of this about 15 to 20 minutes prior to eating, along with a good glass of water, and it really helps your digestive tract to work a lot better.
Yeah, so all of these bitter herbs, when taken before a meal, are what originated with what they call digestives. And so, I love the older German model, and it's still alive in Germany now. You know, people stop by the bar on the way home from work and have a little shot of bitters to stimulate their digestion and prepare them for eating dinner when they get home. Also, nice little social time there. And that's where traditional digestives like absinthe actually came into play. It turns out that wormwood might not have been the best one because it can cause hallucinations in some people, but you know, the bitters before a meal is a good traditional remedy.
And when we say sweet, nourishing herbs, we're not talking about sweet, nourishing bitters for the person who just asked that. Those are herbs that we'll probably talk about a little bit later in the presentation. So let's talk next about herbal laxatives. Now, this is where these cleansing programs really can get bad, is when people start taking herbal laxatives on a regular basis. Although they can decrease the colon transit time and speed it up when it's going too sluggish, and a lot of people do have a very slow colon transit time, again, because they're dehydrated and they don't have fiber and so forth. But these are only useful for people who have kind of a slow bowel that needs a little bit of stimulation to get you going, and only for short-term use. They're not really intended to be for long-term use. Okay, go ahead, Thomas, and you tell us about anthraquinone glycosides.
Yes, so anthraquinone glycosides typically are coloring pigments or dyes that are found in herbs that have stimulant laxative action. And there's a handful of these that are known, and actually several different plants, even in different families, can have the same compound. And they stimulate peristaltic action by actually irritating the nerves of the colon, and they also inhibit water and electrolyte absorption in the intestines, so they both soften the stool and stimulate peristaltic action. So they don't irritate the mucous membranes, but they stimulate the nerve endings, like we said. And a pet peeve of any doctor that performs colonoscopies is that these herbs, because of their anthraquinone compounds, actually stain the colon and make it hard to figure out, you know, if something is a small polyp or if it's just a discolored spot. And so they really dislike, I've met several GI doctors that just dislike all herbalists because of Cascara sagrada and Senna. So
yeah, well, the anthraquinones are dyes, so basically that's why they dye the colon. And these are some of the herbs. One of the most popular is Cascara sagrada and its close cousin buckthorn, also Turkey rhubarb. The green part of the aloe vera leaf contains anthraquinones, not the gel. So if you drink, you know, aloe vera juice, you're not going to get anthraquinones from that. There's a drug called aloe that's made from the green part of the leaf. Senna, and there's a small amount of anthraquinones in yellow dock, which is one of the more gentle of your laxatives herbs.
So the problem with herbal laxatives is, number one, not that many people need them. Number two, they tend to aggravate spastic bowel conditions and inflammatory problems. They can cause problems in pregnancy and nursing. They tend to drain your energy and cause the colon to become habituated to them. I wish I could remember the Chinese terms for that. There's some type of qi that's drained by using laxatives regularly, and it's always funny to talk about that, but I forget the term. They aggravate dehydration, like Steven was talking about. You know, because they promote more water staying in the colon. If you're already dehydrated, that can keep other organs that need the water from reaching them. Right. So there's just a handful of problems, and they really should be used a lot more cautiously than they are. So tell us how to get people off of these laxatives.
Yeah, this is the kind of strategy that I've used when people basically get habituated to these things and they can't seem to go to the bathroom without it. The first thing is to increase water intake to hydrate the bowel, and we're talking about taking 2 full glasses of water a half an hour before you eat, 1 glass of water a couple hours after you eat. make sure you drink water first thing in the morning, and make sure you drink water before going to bed, and eliminate or dehydrating beverages as much as possible, like soda pop and caffeinated drinks, or at least minimize your intake of them. And then what I find helpful is magnesium. Both magnesium and vitamin C will cause diarrhea at a certain dose. So both of them have what's called a bowel tolerance. If you start taking magnesium and vitamin C, especially vitamin C, which also has citrus bioflavonoids, which kind of tone the colon, and you just gradually, day by day, increase the dose, you will hit a point at which you'll get diarrhea. And that's the maximum dose your bowel can tolerate. If you back off from that dose and stay well hydrated, you should actually be able to get regular bowel movements without the use of laxatives. And over time, as your vitamin C reserves and your magnesium reserves increase, you may actually find that you have to back off even further to keep from getting diarrhea. So as your system gets more magnesium in it, that's really important to colon health. Now, you can also increase probiotics in fermented foods to help improve the microflora of the gut. And while you're getting your bowel going again, you can slowly increase the amount of fiber you're taking. I recommend that when you start with fiber, you start with a very tiny amount. Someone mentioned that it's very hard to get more than 35 grams of fiber from fruits and vegetables. I haven't actually ever looked into that really closely, but like I say, it's not too hard to get a little bit of a fiber supplement. There's lots and lots of them on the marketplace. My personal favorite is to take some psyllium hulls with an equal amount of freshly ground flaxseed. I think flaxseed is a really great tonic fiber for the colon because the oils in it are very lubricating and soothing to the colon. And you can also take enzyme supplements on an empty stomach to help break down the food and so forth.
And I want to throw in there as well, a little bit of exercise is really beneficial for the colon. You have somebody take, a 10 or 15 minute walk every day if they aren't exercising, and maybe, do a couple of, squats, build your abdominal muscles up, and that will actually help the muscles of the colon as well.
Yeah, and someone made a comment that a lady was taking a laxative formula called LBS2 and her doctor said it was turning the intestines dark. Could the LBS turn the intestine dark? Yes, because LBS2 is Cascara sagrada, buckthorn, turkey rhubarb. It's a bunch of herbs that contain anthraquinone glycosides, which means that it is going to stain the colon, and that's exactly what we're talking about. It's not that that's been demonstrated to actually harm the colon, but it does get the doctors upset. Okay. So, Thomas.
Yeah. Constipation is not just caused by a lack of laxatives. It's not just caused by a lack of probiotics. It's not just caused by a lack of hydration. It can also be, caused by stress. People hold a lot of stress and tension in their stomach, and stress and tension and the hormone production that causes actually can kill off gut bacteria and damage the gut through the stress hormones, and then just the muscular tension involved in holding on to things that stress you out or piss you off or many other emotions people can store in the gut. And I find that antispasmodics are really wonderful for this type of person. They help to relax intestinal cramps and relieve intestinal irritation. They're great for constipation or diarrhea due to stress. For me, bitters and a little mild antispasmodic work better than any stimulant laxative out there because I have a tendency to hold a little stress in my gut, and I might have regular 2 or 3 bowel movements a day for 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'll get really stressed out and be constipated for a day or two. And I can take these antispasmodics or maybe some nervines that are specific to the gut, and it really takes care of all of my digestive issues.
Okay, so um, these are some indications that antispasmodics might be the answer to helping normalize your elimination. If your bowel movements tend to be erratic, uh, uh, that's a sign of spastic bowel conditions, meaning that you're going along and you're fine, and then all of a sudden you get under a lot of stress and your whole system gets messed up. Now there's a simple physiological explanation for that, and that is that when you're stressed, you're activating the sympathetic nervous system, and the sympathetic nervous system tends to turn off gut motility. It just decreases peristalsis of the intestinal tract and increases the tendency to constipation. Whereas you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, get those smooth muscles relaxing, things move forward again. If you get cramping pains in your abdomen, a lot of people who have kind of a spastic bowel condition, if they take anthraquinone glycosides, herbs that contain those laxatives, they'll actually get cramps in their intestinal tract. I know I used to get that when I would take a stimulant laxative, which is a sign of a spasticity in the colon. Again, the constipation associated with stress, sharp pains that come and go, or if you have alternating diarrhea and constipation, then that very well can be a sign that you need antispasmodics.
Yes, so some common antispasmodic remedies. Magnesium is an antispasmodic by itself. Lobelia, wild yam. I find wild yam is a really wonderful one in very small doses if you have pain that comes and goes in the gut. Catnip is just a good antispasmodic and nervine for the entire digestive tract. I can't sing the praises of a fresh catnip tincture enough. A dried tea is really nice too. Chamomile is really nice. Peppermint is another mild antispasmodic to the gut. I commonly make up equal parts of catnip, chamomile, and peppermint, and I call that my tummy tea because it makes my tummy feel good and really helps the whole digestive process out.
Yeah, and I've seen lobelia in a certain amount, if you take it over a little bit of time, actually work just like laxative to clear the intestinal tract out where there's a lot of tension in the colon. Now, there's another problem that happens, and that is the intestinal tract gets loses tone, which gets often accompanies inflammation, a condition called leaky gut syndrome, as well as you get some of those little pockets forming because the bowel wall gets weak. And you can use astringents to tone up the gut membranes and improve the tone of the digestive tracts. Again, just like your laxatives, these are only used for a short period of time. They're not used long-term. They're used for short-term therapy to get the gut to tone up. If you get diagnosed with leaky gut syndrome, if you have bleeding in the intestines, hemorrhoids or anal fistula, diarrhea, or mucus in the stools, these are all indications that you may need to take some astringents to tone up the gut membranes. Now, someone earlier asked about the problem of diarrhea, and if you have a tendency to diarrhea, there could be several things going on. One, you could have quite a bit of intestinal inflammation, but also that may be due partly to nervous reaction. But the most common things to try first are to increase your fiber to hold on to things that irritate the system, and try a little bit of an astringent to tone up the gut. If the problem persists, then you may have some real problems with your gut microflora or parasites or other problems that you may need to go get checked out to determine exactly what needs to be done.
Yes, so some common astringents here. White oak bark is a really common one, and it contains tannins, which have an astringent action. Bayberry root bark. Kudzu is a mild astringent. Kudzu is actually a first-degree remedy because it's commonly eaten. or the roots are at least, and I also jelly the flowers up when I get a chance. Cat's claw is a really interesting one. It's a mild astringent. It's very anti-inflammatory for the gut. So
Yeah,
all of these can be used for, gut inflammation, leaky gut.
yeah, and cat's claw is a good just general remedy if you're not sure. Because it seems to have a normalizing effect on the gut membrane. So it's a very good one to try in these kinds of conditions. Okay, so we've mentioned about intestinal inflammation, and so far we actually haven't talked about the remedies that you take to actually reduce the inflammation. And so we want it, because this is a really big part of the big picture, and it's something that a lot of people don't even think of when they think about detoxification. Anti-inflammatories are going to reduce that inflammation, irritation to the intestines, soothe the membranes. They're going to help inflammatory bowel disorders, and they're also very important for actually long-term restoring gut health.
Yeah, so if you have occasional diarrhea or a tendency to lose stool frequently, if you have a overly rapid colon transit time, so if you eat some beets and your bowel movement is red 4 hours later, that's too fast of a colon transit time, and you need to slow it down so you can actually absorb the nutrients from there. If you have blood in your stool, if you've been diagnosed with any inflammatory bowel disorder like colitis or Crohn's or IBS or celiac or acute diverticulitis, if you have a bright red tongue with a yellow coating, or if you have sores and bumps at the back of your tongue, you really need to work on reducing the inflammation in your gut.
Some of the herbs that are very helpful here include peach, which I know is one of Matthew Wood's favorite remedies, and you like it too, don't you, Thomas?
Oh, yeah, it's great.
A very, very cooling, soothing remedy for heat conditions. Aloe vera juice is really nice here. The little bit of sourness in the aloe vera juice has a nice cooling effect, plus aloe vera contains some of those soothing mucopolysaccharides, and just drinking the aloe vera juice can do wonders for gut inflammation. Chamomile and licorice are two excellent herbs that are helpful for reducing the inflammation in the gut. Licorice root has been used even for ulcers and ulcerations, and chamomile we mentioned earlier as having a relaxing effect on the gut, as well as now we see that it also has an anti-inflammatory effect on the gut, as well as it stimulates digestive secretion. So it can be a really wonderful remedy for the gastrointestinal tract, especially when taken in a tea form, in a liquid form. It does not work as well in capsules. Yellow dock is an interesting one here because yellow dock is a mild laxative, and it's also an anti-inflammatory and a mild gut astringent. So it is a good remedy for normalizing the gut when you may have a tendency to diarrhea and or constipation, or going back and forth between the two. And it's also one of the remedies that works when you have that patchiness, that red patchiness on your tongue that is associated with something called geographic tongue. Other good remedies here to consider would be plantain, marigold, and turmeric. Someone asked Thomas how you use the peach. Is it it's peach leaf that you use typically, isn't it?
It's the leaf or the fresh green twigs or twig bark in the springtime, and it's tinctured. I tincture mine in brandy. And I just want to point out here, an easy way to think about this is you have a sunburn of your gut. Okay, so think about remedies that you would put on a sunburn. Soothing, calming aloe vera, or maybe you would soak in some calendula and plantain tea, or, I spray that on. If you think about the mucous membranes as being an internal skin, they're inflamed just like a sunburn, and if you treat it that way, like you would a sunburn, you'll get really good results.
Right. Now, we've talked a lot about the gut, but really really restoring health to the gut is a part of detoxification. Mostly because a healthy gut helps protect you against toxins. Meaning if your gut is inflamed, it increases intestinal permeability, which allows toxins and infections to get into your body more readily. But once things have gotten into your body, once these chemicals get into your body, the way that your body gets rid of them is via the liver. So it is really the liver, not the colon, that is the primary organ of detoxification and the primary organ that we need to take care of if we want to detoxify. That's why just taking laxatives and getting yourself to, to poop and pee more is not detoxifying your body, because the liver has to process toxins for elimination so that they can be excreted. And until the liver can metabolically transform the toxins into something that can be excreted either through the urine or through the bowel, they're not going to get out of your body. So just increasing the elimination doesn't do the detoxification if you don't support what the liver has to do to break down this stuff. And since our livers have to process every drug a person takes, every pesticide that's in the food, every hormone that are in the body or neurotransmitter that our body is done with, every artificial chemical, food additive, dye agent, even natural compounds in the foods we eat have to be broken down by the enzymatic pathways in the liver. You can guess that in modern society the liver is taking a heavy hit and needs a lot of nutritional support.
So some real basic symptoms of a sluggish liver include a bloated or stuffy feeling under the right rib cage, nervous energy in the evening. You get ready to go to bed and then all of a sudden, boom, you're wide awake, and you're probably because your liver isn't breaking down some of those hormones properly. You get grogginess in the mornings, frequent headaches, especially over the eyes, chronic skin problems, acne, blemishes. All of these are symptoms of sluggish liver function.
Go ahead with the tests for this.
Yeah, so there are also medical tests. You can use a clearance test with saliva, urine, and or blood after a chemical challenge. So basically what you do is you take a caffeine pill, an aspirin pill, and a Tylenol pill, and then you check your saliva, urine, and blood and see how fast it takes to break these down, because they're broken down by different pathways in the liver. So you can find out if your phase 1 is working too fast or too slow, or if your phase 2 is working too fast or too slow. An even better one is a urine organic acid test, and so organic acids are these metabolic intermediates that are produced during detoxification, and if you're excreting high levels of specific organic acids, it can signal a potential accumulation in the body of particular toxins, because that helps you figure out which of the phase 2 pathways you're dealing with. Also, just looking at any Chem 14, you'll see numbers for AST, ALT, and ALP, and all of these are liver enzymes, and the enzymes are elevated when there's any irritation or fatty liver or cirrhosis or any type of liver issue. So, I use a more narrow range than a doctor would use, or a normal lab range, but you can just look at an average medical test and figure out the general condition of your liver.
Okay, so basically this is what an overview of liver detoxification looks like. The body takes metabolic byproducts, microbial endotoxins. See, what really kills you in an infection is the bacteria themselves, the toxins they produce. Chemicals, or when your body breaks down fat, any chemicals stored in fat, and it pulls them through a two-phase detoxification system. In phase 1, the body basically adds or subtracts electrons from the toxin to give it an electrical charge. That creates something called an intermediate metabolite, which is then pulled into a second set of enzymes called phase 2 that attach that electrically charged toxin to an organic compound to make it water soluble for excretion. either through the bile into the gastrointestinal tract. This is where I believe a lot of the gooey stuff coming out of cleanse is coming from, is it's stuff coming off the liver through the bile that's getting latched onto by the fiber and carried out of the body, and also through the urine, which is why you need a lot of water, because you got to flush the toxins out through the kidneys too. The phase 1 detoxification process produces superoxide radicals, and the intermediate metabolites can act as radical oxygen intermediates, meaning basically that they cause oxidative damage or free radical damage, which is why the liver needs more antioxidants than pretty much any other organ in the body except the eyes. And so in Chinese medicine, there is a link considered between eye health and liver health. So problems like cataract formation and macular degeneration and diabetic retinopathy are all signs that a person does not have enough antioxidants, and the eyes are suffering oxidative damage. But if the eyes don't have enough antioxidants, the liver doesn't have enough antioxidants, and so those two things are very strongly linked together.
Yes, so these enzymes that Stephen mentioned that electrically charge your toxins by adding or eliminating an electron, they're known as the cytochrome P450 superfamily, or just P450 enzymes. And these enzymes are responsible for this phase 1 detoxification. Some general symptoms of liver congestion indicate sluggish phase 1 detoxification. So does a sensitivity to caffeine, alcohol, and other chemical substances. So if you drink a cup of coffee and you don't feel anything, maybe you have slow phase 1 detox. You know, if you fast phase 1 detox, because it's breaking that caffeine down really fast. If you drink a cup of coffee and you're wired for hours and hours and even a day or more, then maybe your body doesn't break that compound down very well, indicating slow phase 1 detox. And alcohol's the same way, you know. If you have a glass of nice organic sulfate-free wine and you instantly get a headache and you're intoxicated for 6 hours, then you know, your body's probably not breaking that alcohol down very well, and you might do something to speed up your phase 1 pathways.
Now, this is where one of the myths comes in about detoxification. Detoxification actually requires really good nutrition. You need nutrients. These are the nutrients. This is just not necessarily a complete list, but these are major nutrients that the body requires in phase 1 detoxification. You notice that you've got B vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin E, a number of different minerals, choline, which is an amino acid, different fatty acids, lecithin, methionine, which is another fatty acid. So there are nutrients that if your body is deficient in those nutrients, you're not going to be able to detoxify chemicals in the liver. So we have a very unusual situation in today's modern world that basically is making a lot of the things that were traditionally done in herbal medicine and natural healing not work as well as they used to. And it's a twofold problem. One, we have all those thousands of chemical compounds that the body's never dealt with before. And two, we have people eating extremely nutritionally poor diets. So they're lacking in vitamins, they're lacking in minerals, they're lacking in nutrients the body needs to break down chemicals. And that's creating disastrous results for people's health. And then when you think that detoxification is just taking laxatives and so forth and not getting good nutrition into the body to give the body what it needs to break these down, you're missing a lot of the boat of what detoxification is really all about.
So you can do some really easy things to enhance phase 1 detoxification. Number one, cruciferous vegetables speed up phase 1 detoxification. Most bitter liver herbs speed up detoxification, but pretty much anything that tastes bitter is probably going to help out with phase 1 detoxification. Milk thistle is a really nice one, helps out phase 1 and actually helps protect your liver cells against oxidative damage. Your B-complex vitamins are really important. Protein in the form of broken down protein in the form of amino acids is important, as is vitamin C. All of these things can help increase your body's phase 1 detoxification.
Okay, so we already talked about this problem of free radicals, that the phase 1 detoxification process produces free radicals, both in the form of superoxide radicals and intermediate metabolites, which can be really even more toxic than the original toxin, because now it's got an electrical charge on it. So the liver has to neutralize these free radicals, which is what I mentioned earlier, that makes the liver one of the biggest users of antioxidants in the body. So that's why both the liver and the eyes require large amounts of these, and why the liver and the eyes are linked together. Someone asked a good question about this. When a person is too weak to or nutrient deficient to cleanse, well, that's actually part of the point we're talking about. If a person is really weak and nutrient deficient and they're on a really poor diet and they're thin and pale and they're tired all the time, doing the kind of things where you're just stimulating elimination is actually going to weaken them further. In this case, you got to shove their body full of really good nutrition. You've got to get fatty acids into their body. You got to get amino acids into their body. You got to get vitamins and minerals into their body, and that will actually initiate detoxification in them by helping to give them the nutrients their body needs to detoxify. And as they get stronger, then basically they're going to be able to handle doing things to increase elimination and so forth.
Yeah, if a person doesn't have a swollen, scalloped, heavily coated tongue, they don't need to stimulate detoxification. What they need is a bowl of lamb soup, and the nutrients in that will actually help the body detoxify.
That's why people going on and eating a healthier diet can have what you might call a healing crisis, is that you're eating really good nutritionally dense foods, and all of a sudden your body starts to detoxify. And this is why, because you've been giving the body the nutrients it needs to start to detoxify. Take it away, Thomas.
Yes. So, as Steven mentioned, the liver needs large amounts of antioxidants to counteract these things that it's moving through phase 1 detoxification. My favorite source of antioxidants is in fruits and vegetables: blueberries, blackberries, raspberries. Lycium and other sour herbs. The taste of sour typically indicates antioxidants and bioflavonoids. Chaga is a wonderful medicinal mushroom and is higher in antioxidants than blueberries is actually. Your liver naturally produces glutathione, which is made out of a couple of amino acids, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Superoxide dismutase your liver produces as an antioxidant. Alpha-lipoic acid, vitamin C, vitamin E, selenium, all of these things can help your liver keep from being damaged as it breaks down the toxic compounds from our environment.
Now, when the toxins have been processed, then basically the phase 2 detoxification enzymes basically add different chemical groups to the toxins in a process called conjugation. In other words, joining together the toxin with some kind of organic compound that makes it water soluble and able to be safely, essentially neutralized and flushed out through the kidneys or the bile. So you can think of phase 1 detoxification as bagging up the trash, and phase 2 detoxification as taking it out. So symptoms of sluggish phase 2 include the fact that you start to take supplements for phase 1, or you start to improve your diet and you start to feel sick because your body starts processing and creating a lot of intermediate metabolites, and you're not able to conjugate them or flush them from the system quickly enough, so you start feeling sick, which is a sign you need to slow down. Anybody who tells you when you're having a healing crisis that you need to just push forward with it really is not being very smart. What you need to do is slow down, drink a bunch of water, and give your body time for your body to catch up. So that's what people call a healing crisis, and sometimes when you push for change too fast in the body, you get that, but it's not a good thing. So I always tell people to slow down and take a little extra fiber, drink a lot of extra water, and give their body time to catch up. Also, toxemia in pregnancy is actually a problem with phase 2 detoxification, as are reactions to specific toxins in the form of environmental illnesses, where people get deathly ill just sniffing the fragrances going down the soap aisle at the grocery store or something like that. It just simply means their body does not have the capability of processing or neutralizing toxins very well. And that is the problem with phase 2.
I remember the first client I ever had that had multiple chemical sensitivity, and you never see these people because they can't leave home. This woman could literally smell somebody's perfume, her brain would swell, and she would wake up in the hospital 3 weeks later after having been in a coma from just one big whiff of a chemical-laden perfume. And you know, she'd been working with a couple of herbalists, and nobody had been able to help her because they kept doing you know, dandelion and burdock and milk thistle and all of these cleansing herbs, which would have been fine if her phase 2 pathways could have handled it. So after getting her on some nutrients for phase 2 over the course of 6 or 8 months, she got to where she could, you know, actually function again and not have these violent reactions to chemicals. And it was all about working on the phase 2 pathways. And it takes nutrients to do that, you know. So if you don't have adequate amounts of folate, you know, folic acid, vitamins B1, B2, B3, B5, B6, B12, all your B vitamins really. Vitamin C, if you don't have germanium and magnesium and manganese and molybdenum and selenium and sulfur and zinc, and you know, if you don't have amino acids like cysteine and glycine and taurine, you can't produce these compounds that bind to your phase 1 byproducts and toxins. You can use things like L-glutathione intravenously, or you can, you know, use it in a dermal cream, or it doesn't really absorb that well when you consume it orally because the stomach tends to break it down into cysteine and methionine. But you can supplement with your precursors, or you can take N-acetylcysteine, which will boost up your body's glutathione production. And all of these things are really as important in my practice, if not more so, than dealing with phase 1 detoxification.
Okay, so these compounds that the liver attaches these things to are called conjugates. And there are 6 forms of conjugates. When the body attaches the toxin to an amino acid, that's called acylation, or amino acid conjugation is another way of saying that. You also have conjugation with sugars, which is called glucuronidation. You have conjugation with glutathione, which is called glutathione conjugation. You have methyl compounds, methanione, which is an amino acid that is a methyl donor amino acid. But there's other compounds that are methyl compounds that create methylation, and then you also have sulfur compounds that are used for a process called sulfation. And then the last one is acetyl-CoA, which produces a conjugation process called acetylation. So basically these are your 6 pathways of phase 2, and they handle different types of toxic compounds.
So when an amino acid binds with these things, this is your amino acid conjugation pathway, and this helps the body to get rid of a handful of toxic chemicals and you know, xenobiotics. Specifically, this pathway removes benzoate, which is a food preservative, aspirin, and a popular industrial solvent. When you have a disturbed amino acid conjugation going on, you have a decrease in bile in the intestinal tract, resulting in a poor assimilation of fats and fat-soluble vitamins. You have, you know, messed up cholesterol metabolism. This can be one of the causes of elevated or super suppressed cholesterol levels. So this pathway is pretty important.
And it's now this is not to say that acylation, poor acylation is the cause of these disorders, but basically it's common to find people with these disorders having poor acylation, which is part of the process going on in their body that's making them sick. So hepatitis and alcoholic liver disorders and carcinomas and chronic arthritis and low thyroid and toxemia in pregnancy and problems with chemical exposure can basically reduce acylation, meaning that the person needs to increase nutrition to help the liver basically break down these compounds.
And so the amino acids used in this are glycine, taurine, glutamine, arginine, and ornithine. So taurine and glycine reactions require an alkaline pH, and you might consider, supplementing with some type of free-formed amino acid. I like whey protein for this pathway. It has all of these essential amino acids in it, and it's pretty inexpensive. You could use algae supplements that are high in amino acids, like spirulina, blue-green algae, chlorella. You could eat more, high-quality animal proteins, and with improved digestion, break those down into the necessary amino acids.
Glucuronidation is not one of the more important pathways. It's basically a secondary pathway that's used when sulfation and glycination aren't available very well. It detoxifies a number of compounds, but I mentioned it's not exactly one of the more critical pathways, but it does require glutamine and aspartic acid, magnesium, and B vitamins for the processing. Thomas can tell us about glutathione conjugation, which is one of the really important ones.
Yeah. So I think, what is it? Sulfation and glutathione conjugation are the two biggest. I think those two are the ones that detoxify the most compounds. Glutathione conjugation is actually where your liver that produces glutathione helps to bind to these phase 1 toxins. And it's not just the liver that uses glutathione, it's actually the liver, the lungs, the intestines, the kidneys, the brain, all these different places.
The eyes.
The eyes, yeah. All of these, basically every cell in every tissue in your body, I believe, can use glutathione to bind to poisons that are produced either in the cell or the cell is exposed to. Heavy metals inhibit your body's production of glutathione. I would try to pronounce a handful of these specific toxins, but you could probably read the screen easier than I could pronounce these. Let's just say that all of these are nasty compounds, and glutathione is responsible for binding to and eliminating these from the body. Yes, so you have to have the amino acids cysteine, glutamic acid, and glycine to produce glutathione. You can raise glutathione levels with vitamin C, alpha-lipoic acid, raw whey protein, and the amino acids glutamine and methionine. Cruciferous vegetables also can help out with this glutathione conjugation pathway. N-acetylcysteine is a really wonderful one to take for glutathione production. And remember, and it aggravates the stew out of me, I've seen on the market people selling glutathione encapsulated, and to my knowledge there's never been any research done that shows that actually raises levels, because the body will break down glutathione in the gut into glutamine and methionine. Okay, so you can take your precursors, but I don't think it gets past stomach acid and actually boost your levels. So take your precursors to glutathione and let your liver do it itself.
Yeah, there is no research showing that taking glutathione orally has any effect on glutathione levels. Now, another really important pathway that actually isn't just in the liver, actually all the cells use it, is methylation. And methylation is important because one of the things it breaks down is excess hormones and neurotransmitters. So it breaks down excess estrogens. It breaks down adrenaline and noradrenaline, or the epinephrine, norepinephrine that is released under stress. It breaks down excess dopamine or melatonin or histamine, which causes allergies, or serotonin, or homocysteine, which is basically high levels of homocysteine are linked as a risk factor in heart disease. So poor methylation can be a contributing factor in the creation of heart disease, cancer, arthritis, and also in PMS. So if you have some of these kinds of conditions, or because we're exposed to a lot of xenoestrogens and endocrine disrupting chemicals in our environment, these compounds that enhance methylation can be really important for protecting our body. So the methylation is primarily done with an amino acid called methanone, and B complex vitamins. Certain B complex vitamins are methyl donors, B6, B12, and folic acid. Also choline and a compound called SAMe. SAMe is very helpful as a methyl donor and contributes to a lot of different methylation processes in the body. And then also bentane found in beets and magnesium is very critical to the function of the enzyme that creates methyl compounds, methyltransferase. And about 70 to 80% of the population is deficient in magnesium. So magnesium can be a very, very critical compound for methylation.
So not only does your body use these methyl compounds for methylating and getting rid of the stuff, but your methyl compounds actually influence how your genes express. So when you look at epigenetics, or the gene above your normal gene expression, a lot of that's controlled by methyl compounds. And so having adequate methyl compounds is really super important.
Yeah, actually can actually help with genetic disorders and help to improve the way your genes function and the way you actually pass on genetic information to your offspring.
Yep. So our next pathway is our sulfation pathway, and this is the primary pathway for eliminating excess neurotransmitters. Reduced sulfation has been shown to be involved in Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, and other nervous system disorders. Environmental illnesses may also involve reduced sulfation. Steroidal hormones, thyroid hormones, neurotransmitters are all broken down by the sulfation pathway. Several drugs, including acetaminophen, some food additives, some toxins from intestinal bacteria, and many environmental toxins are broken down by the sulfation pathway. So the sulfation pathway requires amino acids, methionine, cysteine, taurine, and glutathione. It requires zinc, copper, selenium, magnesium, molybdenum, all of your B vitamins. You can help the methylation, the sulfation pathway out with MSM, which is a sulfur compound. Garlic and onions, their strong smell comes from their sulfur compounds, which can help the sulfation pathway out, as can cruciferous vegetables. N-acetylcysteine can help the sulfation pathway out, and your sulfation pathway can be impaired by too much B6 or molybdenum.
The final pathway is called acetylation, which uses acetyl-CoA, and people who are slow acetylators tend to be chemically sensitive. So without the N-acetyl transferase enzyme activity, which is the enzyme involved here, these people cannot break down chemicals in the environment fast enough, thus resulting in heightened toxicity that creates these environmental illnesses, as well as the fact that this pathway can break down histamine, serotonin, PABA, salicylic acid, and sulfa drugs. This one requires pantothenic acid, vitamin C, and thiamine for it to work properly.
So all of these conjugated or bound to toxins are excreted via the kidneys or the liver. So your smaller molecules you pass out through urine, and your larger ones are excreted through bile. Uh, Water and fiber are the two big things needed to finish the elimination of toxins, because remember that our fiber binds to bile released from the liver and the gallbladder, and it's a really good probability that it's bile interacting and binding to fiber that results in that black gooey stuff that you see all the pictures of. Water helps to dilute toxins for excretion through the kidneys and helps to move toxins out from the colon. So hydration and fiber are two really important aspects of detoxification.
Which, of course, goes right back to what we said in the beginning about the health of the colon, with water and fiber being the first two things that we need, which are also the things that need to finish the detoxification process. So there are some things that inhibit liver detoxification. One of them is nutritional deficiencies. A lot of prescription drugs will inhibit liver detoxification. Having a low thyroid can inhibit it, as well as having any kind of liver disorders. And insulin resistance, as in type 2 diabetes, also inhibits liver detoxification. So you always want to look at the health of the body as a whole and correct the thing. So in finishing up, we want to talk a little bit about how to survive in a toxic world, because we do live in a world where we are just having massive problems with toxins and garbage. So Thomas.
Yes, so the American Cancer Society says that prior to the 20th century, only 1 out of about 8,000 Americans got cancer. Now, it's not that they could not diagnose cancer 100 years ago, guys. You know, cancer symptoms have been the same and have been recorded for 1,000 years or longer. The problem is that it's just occurring more and more frequently. Now 1 out of every 3 people gets cancer. And it's the leading cause of death for people between 45 and 75 years old. You know, since World War II, we've developed more than 80,000 chemicals. And yeah, they might get a test ran on them that lasts for 2 months for toxicity, but how long of a test are they using for all of these chemicals that they're constantly developing, and how many of these chemicals put together are they testing? You know, the fact is that there's pollution all around us. It's in our environment. It's in the air we breathe. In any city, it's in the air we breathe. It's in the air we breathe while we're inside. You know, 80% of people's exposure to chemicals occurs in the home. Have you ever gotten an aerosol can of, I'll just say, you know, room deodorizer and used it once and stuck it underneath your kitchen sink, and 6 months later you went to use it and there was nothing there? All of that is in your house. It was slowly released. You know, cleaning products found in the average home are 3 times more likely to cause cancer than outdoor pollution, even in the worst cities. You could go, you know, suck on car fumes and have a less chance of cancer than using some of these common cleaning items.
And one of the things that this little chart here is showing is that, you know, we say heart disease is the leading cause of death, and that's true. It's the leading cause of death in old age, but actually in the leading cause of premature death is actually cancer. And so this is, and notice also where liver disease sits in here, and some other things. So it's very important that for our health we can do this. So the biggest part of detoxification isn't getting the toxins out of your body, it's getting them out of your life. So what we want to do is look for ways to reduce them. Now, one of the toxins we get exposed to is allergens. So that's different for everyone. I mean, a lot of people have sensitivity to gluten or casein and dairy products. So you just because it's a natural food doesn't mean it's necessarily good for you. You have to, you know, kind of learn what your body needs and what it doesn't need, what it reacts to, what it doesn't react to. Of course, if you can avoid agricultural chemicals in your food and chemical additives by eating like organically grown foods and as natural foods as possible, and foods that have not been heavily processed to remove all the nutrients out of them. And also, it's a good idea not to learn good cooking methods. I don't microwave food. I don't even own a microwave. I don't like to eat microwave food. And I also like to cook using, traditional cooking methods like stewing and roasting and not cooking food to death. I mean, basically, a lot of people now overcook their food.
Yeah, so, indoor pollution is a big deal. If your fabrics, everything from carpets and upholsteries to clothing, releases chemicals in the surrounding air. Building materials, including solvents and glues and paints. Stephen and I could tell you about paints. I'm having a room repainted, and we almost suffocated and died today because of the fumes coming off of it.
Yeah. Yeah, had to definitely open up the windows and run the fan, huh?
Right. So studies show that even in smog-filled cities, there are less toxins outside than inside. So open your windows up, get a nice fan, take walks outside, get out of the house. I'm fond of taking my little laptop computer and sitting outside on my swing or on my picnic table while I work and help put together these PowerPoints, and get outside as much as possible, not only to reduce your exposure to toxins, but just to reconnect with outdoors with nature. That's healing in itself.
I am a strong believer in taking all of your household cleaning products, reading the labels, and throwing away all the toxic stuff as much as possible and replacing it with more natural, non-toxic cleaning products. Household cleaning products are a major cause of environmental pollution as well as pollution in your home. And if you just look at the labels on a lot of this stuff, how dangerous it is, there's all kinds of all-natural alternatives. I know two women who cleaned homes for a living, both of whom had serious respiratory problems, and when they stopped using commercial cleaners and switched to all-natural cleaners, their respiratory problems cleared up. That just shows you how toxic this stuff can be.
And we aren't asking you to go spend $100 restocking your pantry with Walmart brand quote natural cleaners. What we're saying is that if it can't be cleaned with a little bit of soap and vinegar and orange oil, it probably isn't going to come clean. And there are a lot of easy methods. You can just look online for tons of recipes on how to make this stuff. Yeah. Same thing with personal care products. Cosmetics and deodorants and lotions and shampoos and conditioners and toothpaste. They put tons of junk in these. Become a label reader. It's very important not only in what you eat but also what you put on your body to look and see how many words you can't pronounce. And my typical rule is if I can't pronounce it, I'm not going to put it on me or in me.
Yeah, me too. Exactly the same thing. And I can't believe all the pesticides and herbicides people use around their home. And this stuff is like deadly toxic. I remember an internist who totally believed this because two of the people he'd seen who'd messed themselves up the worst were people who accidentally, in mixing some pesticides to spray in their yard using the concentrates, had accidentally spilled the concentrate on their skin, just spilled it on their skin, and had become deathly ill from doing that. That's how poisonous this stuff is. It was originally designed to kill human beings in chemical warfare and then got associated with this.
Yeah, so now that the war is over, what are we going to do with these 3 trillion tons of chemicals we were going to kill people with? Oh, okay, let's put them on our yards and our food supply. That sounds brilliant. Oh, goodness. So, not only is it inside our home, but we're getting environmental pollution from most major industries, automotive pollution. The things found in water today is just ridiculous. Not only, do they treat our drinking water with chlorine and fluorine and bromides, all of which are toxic chemicals in themselves, but, I'm sure all of you have probably seen these studies where they found, 20, 30 common prescriptions in every water supply in America. The importance of having good, clean water just really can't be emphasized enough.
And finally, there is also electromagnetic nuclear pollution. I mean, we've got a major problem now with the nuclear power plants. I think that there's been a lot of cover-up with the amount of radiation that's gone into the air from the disaster in Japan, and that is basically, have a friend in the West Coast who says everybody that she's been seeing has been testing for high doses of iodine out there. Also, there's electromagnetic pollution, which means we're exposed to an undue amount of electromagnetic fields through computers, cell phones, microwave ovens, radar, and everything, and there are some definite signs of damage with this. I get various kinds of little diodes and devices that actually help shield you from electromagnetic pollution. I found they actually help give me more energy when I'm having to work around all this stuff. So these are things that you also want to be aware of. I always use a headset when I'm talking on my cell phone for any length of time. Part of the reason for that is when I'm talking on my cell phone without one, I can feel it like my eardrum starts to hurt, because you can feel the radiation hitting your brain, and there are studies showing that that can increase the risk of tumors. So just being conscious. One thing I do want to talk about is let's not get paranoid. I see people who get so paranoid about this that they basically, are scared of everything. And I'm not doing this because I'm afraid. I'm doing this because I desire to be healthy. The body can handle a certain amount of toxins. If we're concentrating on having good nutrition and minimizing our exposure to toxins, we can have good health. But to get paranoid and all fearful about every little thing is not healthy either. So just wanted to make that. So any parting comments, Thomas?
Yeah, just, like Steve and I have said for years, while detoxification is important and you now know a lot more about it, the emphasis should be on building health. And as you build up somebody's health with, good healthy foods, nutrition, all these other things really come much easier and more naturally.
Yeah. Now, before we go and answer a lot of the questions that I know some of you have typed in that we haven't answered as going along, you get here our little spiel for our next module for our Advanced Herbal Training Program. If you've enjoyed listening to this class, then we invite you to register for Module 5. We're going to be talking about herbs for detoxification. The class dates are November 1st, 15th, 22nd, and December 6th and 13th. The class is held at the same time this webinar was, from 8:30 Eastern, which is 7:30 Central, 6:30 Mountain, and 5:30 Pacific time. We record all classes, including those of you asked. This class was recorded and will be posted at modernherbalmedicine.com. That's where the handouts are also posted. And so if you register for the class and you can't make it during the class time, you can always download the recordings and handouts and study on your own. We give 10 hours of instruction, essentially 2 hours of instruction per class, for $157. However, if you pre-register by October 24th, you save $30, so you get the class for $127. And if you're a member of Tree of Light's Share the Sunshine program, which by the way costs $19.95 a month, it's an additional $30 discount, meaning the class is $97. You can register at treelight.com or call our toll-free number 800-416-2887. Someone said the link to Modern Herbal Medicine does not work. I was having some problems with it last night. I'm not sure what the problem was. It was working this morning, and there was a problem with the handout link when I first posted it, but my son fixed it. There was a problem with the link, but it should be working now. Now we come to the question and answer period. So we will go back and answer as many of these questions as we can. Someone asked, will taking senna turn the color, stain the colon? And yes, because senna contains anthraquinone glycosides. Someone asked about the product Clean Start will clean 5 body systems. Is that true? Well, I don't know specifically if Clean Start cleans 5 body. Really, you detoxify the body as a whole. I mean, in other words, the process of detoxification, Clean Start contains laxative and some fiber and some bitters, so it's going to help stimulate elimination through the colon and have some fiber and whatever, but it's not going to necessarily increase liver detoxification that much, which requires good nutrition. A cleansing program like that is good for an occasional cleanse, once or twice a year, but most of the time it's really the good nutrition and the fiber and water that you need for long-term maintenance. Someone said that they have seen black tarry strings come from clients because of old blood in the stool. Thomas, have you ever heard of anything like that?
Yeah, blood from the upper GI can be black by the time it comes out, and it is stringy and does look different than the tar, fiber bile thing that we looked at earlier. And that's typically not blood in the stool is typically not a good sign.
Yeah, that is actually a sign of someone ought to go get checked out, because they have bleeding in the intestinal tract is extremely dangerous, because if you get bleeding in the intestinal tract and it's not treated properly, you can have internal hemorrhaging that can kill you. And so very important to get that checked out by a medical doctor. So when the tongue is swollen, it's an indicator of what? I'll let you answer that one, Thomas.
Yeah, when the tongue is swollen, flabby, scalloped on the edges, it's an indication of stagnation as a general tissue state, and that means that you need to work on fluid movement in the body with bitters and alternatives.
Someone asked about the problem of loose stools, and I think we kind of answered that in the course of the class. The fiber, possibly astringents, probiotics for the gut, anti-inflammatories, maybe some nervines if it's related to stress, and if those things don't work, then also consider looking if you might have some kind of infection or parasites or an inflammatory
food
bowel
allergy.
or food allergies. Yes. Okay. Someone asked about the difference between eating dry foods and eating juicy foods like fruits and vegetables in terms of your water intake. Well, obviously, you don't need quite as much water when you are eating foods that contain more water versus when you're eating foods that are, really dry. But part of the reason why we cook foods is to hydrate them. Like, we don't just eat beans dry. We cook them to moisten them up. But it is true that you may need, if you're eating a lot of foods that aren't necessarily having a lot of moisture, that you may need extra water. But eating foods that are high in water, like fruits and vegetables, does not preclude the need to be drinking water. Someone asked about the best ratio of soluble to insoluble fiber. I don't know. Have you ever heard anything about that, Thomas?
No, not really.
I haven't either. And then someone else commented that I mentioned about that if you look up the fiber in fruits and vegetables, there's no way you could get that much from eating fruits and vegetables. So I'm not sure, but maybe it's just that our foods are, I think part of the reason why that's the case is because people do not eat the peelings and the core and the seeds and the other fiber-rich parts of the foods in a lot of cases.
Yeah, so, and I think that 50 grams might be a little on the high side. I have read where
35.
I've read where indigenous cultures ate up to 50, 60 grams of fiber, but I think the general consensus is somewhere around that 30, 35 mark.
Okay. Someone said, you mentioned undigested foods in the intestines. Isn't this the idea of crust in the colon? Thomas, do you want to address that?
No, it's not the idea of crust in the colon. Undigested food is actually normal in small amounts, and your gut bacteria and yeast take that undigested food and turn it into B vitamins and vitamin K and stuff like that. And then it's moved out within, 12 hours, something like that. So, no, this is not a crust that stays lining the colon. It's just little bits of food that your stomach didn't get to are broken down by gut bacteria.
Yeah, it's part of the finishing of the digestive process that's taking place there. You didn't mention kombucha as a fermented product. Is that a good fermented product?
No, I don't believe that it is. Number one, I don't believe that the commercial kombuchas are super potent, and number two, making your own can be very dangerous, and there's been a handful of people died because they got their culture wrong, and the fact is there's never been any studies done on the combination of bacteria and yeast, and honestly, I only have this opinion because of like the best guy in the world on mushrooms. Steven, he's speaking at the HT conference. His name's, is it Stamens?
I don't remember, but
yeah. I read an article by him within the last couple of weeks saying that people should really probably, unless they're already quite healthy, stay away from kombucha because there is some indication that it can cause issue. I think probably, cultured foods like sauerkraut and kimchi and kefir and yogurt probably are much better for you than a combination of unknown bacteria and yeast like kombucha.
Someone said, is buttermilk a good fermented food? Every time they eat it, they get heartburn.
Well, it is a good fermented food, but it sounds like not for you. If you get heartburn after you eat something, that's typically a sign you probably shouldn't be eating it.
Right, and of course, all the buttermilk today is a cultured milk. It's not a natural buttermilk, but it is a fermented food. Someone mentioned that in the blood type diet, it recommends that fermented foods are not recommended for some blood types. I don't believe that. Even if it says that they're not recommended, I think fermented foods are good for everybody. Some fermented foods may not agree with you, but I don't think you need to worry about that. Someone mentioned putting salt on the feet for detoxifying. Can I explain how that works? No, I've never done that. Have you?
Nope.
Okay, so I have no idea what that's about.
A nice Epsom salt bath does feel relaxing. A nice Epsom salt's foot soak does feel relaxing, though.
Yeah. Okay. Someone asked about noni as a bitter, and noni is not a bitter. Noni is more of a sour antioxidant kind of remedy, not a bitter. Where can you buy bitters in liquid form? Just about any health food store sells them. In fact, let's see. I can't remember all the names of the different bitters formulas, but there's Swedish bitters, there's digestive bitters, there's so forth. Is Oregon grape a good bitter? Yes, it is. Liquid Oregon grape. What makes a person sweat every time they eat? Gets cramps after he plays tennis, and the cramps start in his stomach, work into the back and legs. He says he tried potassium and electrolytes, but it didn't help. Any suggestions?
I would have to see him. I have no idea.
I don't have any idea either. But if he gets cramps, I would guess that he needs more magnesium. But other than that, I'm not sure. Is it possible to use an astringent and an antispasmodic when you have like a tendency to diarrhea?
Yeah, I could see that. I could see like a little yellow dock and wild yam working well.
I can too. So, how many hours should it take till the red and the beets come through to show you have a good colon transit time? Basically, I say that it should clear out in about 24 hours. If it's coming out 2 or 3 days later, it's too long. If it's coming out in anywhere from 48 hours, like less than 8 hours, it's way too fast. What's the component in licorice that makes it a problem for some people? It's called glycyrrhizin. and it can in some people elevate blood pressure by causing secretion of potassium. So it is an herb that you do have to watch and be careful of with people who have elevated blood pressure. However, you can also get deglycerized licorice, which still has some good properties. Someone mentions prescription drugs for pain, such as oxycodone, probably cause problems in the liver, and then maybe causing vision problems. Her mom is taking these and is having, eye problems. Definitely, because remember, the liver has to detoxify these drugs. If there's a shortage of antioxidants and nutrients, then it can, you can get low on antioxidants and so forth, and so definitely that could affect your vision. Latex allergy. Does that fit in with the liver detox? Have you ever worked with latex allergy, Thomas?
I've never seen a latex allergy go away.
I
Once you
haven't.
have that antibody, it's a pain. I don't know anything to do for that.
I don't either. Is benzoate related to benzene? I'm not a chemist, so I'm not sure. So, do you know, Thomas?
I'm not sure either. I'm also not a chemist.
MSG, with people being allergic to it. Actually, monosodium glutamate is a salt of glutamic acid, which is an amino acid, and there's natural glutamine in foods that have something that they call in Orient the taste of umami or deliciousness, like mushrooms and meat and soy sauce and so forth. But the monosodium glutamate can cause some sensitivity just simply by too much. It just puts too much in the system. So really, there's no way to do anything about that if someone's sensitive to it, other than just avoid it. Excessive chemical exposure can mean chemicals. Excessive chemical exposure means too much exposure to chemicals. So like I've seen people who work in labs where they work around a lot of chemicals, or they work in jobs like beauty parlors or whatever where they're around a lot of chemicals, develop issues with their liver and need extra support to aid their liver detoxification things. And the issues with the blotchy skin can definitely be related to a poor detoxification process in the liver. Now this is an interesting one. Someone said that they did the lemon juice, cayenne pepper, and grade B maple syrup 10-day cleanse. They had passed a lot of the stuff like shown in the slides and creeped them out because they were a missionary in Ecuador and thought they were passing tapeworms or something. But as they understand it, this was the psyllium they were taking, interacting with stuff in their body, and is that a good thing? Well, yeah, because people feel better, it's obviously a good thing. And doing that kind of a cleanse once in a while is good. I've done that kind of cleanse before, and I don't know, Thomas, have you ever done like that kind of semi-fasting cleanse? Yeah, he has too. But you just don't want to do it all the time. I mean, doing it periodically, like once a year or maybe even twice a year is okay, but doing it, overdoing it is what we're talking about is not healthy. You really need the rest of the time to be concentrating on good nutrition. What is your opinion of a colonoscopy? Should you get them regularly? Thomas, do you have any opinion on that?
I think yes. I think that colon cancer is easy to treat if it's caught early, and if you're older, then I'm not sure what the current guidelines are. It's I think 50 years old, one every 3 to 5 years, something like that. Look up the current guidelines, and yes, I think it's fine.
Does it matter if beets are pickled or fresh? Not to me. Are pressure cookers a good way to avoid losing nutrients? I think so. I haven't used them too much, but I've heard they are. Someone mentioned that putting essential oils, like 40 drops of essential oils like lemon in the paint, makes it not stink as much and have less problems. And actually, I learned that from Kimberly Ballas, and it actually does work. I've tried it. So if you take 40 drops of lemon or lavender or pine or any kind of essential oils and put them in the paint before you paint, it actually does make you have less reaction to the paint fumes. Okay, let's see. Okay, for those of you who didn't register and who registered since I sent out the email last night for tonight's webinar, I will be sending out, as soon as the webinar recording is posted, I will send out the link again for modernherbalmedicine.com, where the webinar recording will be posted to everyone who attended the webinar tonight, or everyone who registered for the webinar tonight. Okay, and if someone said it's still not working, I will double check that and make sure that it is working. Like I said, there was I was having a problem accessing the website earlier. My son could access it, but I couldn't, so I'm not sure what's been happening with the server. Talk about EMF pollution. What would you recommend for someone who received a very high voltage electrical shock and is feeling very bad the next day? That's not EMF pollution. That's electrical shock. I don't know. Have you ever done anything with someone who's been electrically shocked, Thomas?
No, I mean, off the top of my head, I'd say go hug a tree and play in some dirt and relax for a while.
Yeah, me too. I think if you just lean to rest a little bit. Opposite reaction to alcohol makes a person alert rather than acts as a sedative. Could that be a problem with detox, or just building up, or just an oddity? Don't know. I really don't know.
I don't think that would be detox, and I would wonder how much alcohol does that to a person. Because the sugars in alcohol are a little stimulatory, so, a drink will not make you sluggish and can make you a little more alert, but, 10 makes anybody sluggish.
Can you recommend a good website or cookbook for healthy detoxification meal recipes? I would say that my favorite book is Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon and Marin Ng, and Thomas is giving me the thumbs up. It's not a book on detoxification. It's a good book on just really healthy eating in the traditional way, and it is the book that Thomas and I highly recommend about what's real nutrition versus all of the popular nutritional theories today that are based in a lot of misinformation. I don't know what specific beans you'd eat to get more fiber, but beans are actually a really good source of fiber. So you can get quite a bit of fiber by just eating practically any kind of bean or legume, but you should soak them ideally for at least 24 hours, 12 to 24 hours before cooking them. Makes them a lot easier to digest. Someone mentioned about drinking very little water with meals, and the answer that is actually not really completely true. In fact, if you're dehydrated, you will get gastritis and digestive pain if you don't have enough water. So you may have to drink water with your meals. It is better if you drink the water about 20 to 30 minutes before the meal. Then the water goes into your system, it absorbs into your blood, and then when your body has to make digestive secretions, it's got good hydration in the blood to make the digestive secretions from. But if you're thirsty when you're eating, go ahead and drink some water. It just should be room temperature water, not ice cold water.
Better yet, have a nice warm or hot cup of peppermint or ginger tea. I think that works really well with meals.
Okay, the organic peach nectar is not the same as the peach herb, and it will not work the same. So when you're talking about the peach, we're talking about the peach leaf and the peach bark. So drinking peach juice is not going to have the same effect. Someone said it's 70% soluble and 30% non-soluble is the ratio. I don't know where they got that, but sounds interesting. Someone mentioned about cranberry water detoxification. I've never heard of that one. Have you?
No, I don't think cranberry water. That's fair.
Again, there's a lot of like fasting kind of thing, detox things out there. Again, once in a while doing kind of a fast of some kind is not bad, but to be overdoing it, you can get pretty sick. Um, Someone says they live in Logan, I guess that's Logan, Utah probably, and have been trying to find some grass-fed organic raw milk. I've been told it's illegal to sell it in Utah, and actually it is. Uh, they uh, they made it against the law, unfortunately, so you can't. I mean, I do believe theoretically at one time you were supposed to be able to get it if you went straight to the dairy that made it, but I think there's a lot of states that have made it illegal. There's a big fight on this in a lot of states about the right we have to drink raw milk, which is if we want. Uh, a popular health and diet offer says cranberry water detoxifies the liver and kidneys. Well, obviously cranberry has some antioxidants in it, but I don't think it's any more detoxifying to the liver and kidneys than a lot of other things too. So again, I don't know. See, there's a lot of stuff out there that's just faddish, in my opinion. I mean, what's the latest fad? I mean, sometimes it's aloe vera juice, and then it's pomegranate juice, and then it's cranberry juice, and then noni juice, and then mangosteen, and da 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 da. And it's like, I just to me, it's like kind of variety. I like to do things different. Any comments on that, Thomas?
No, I agree. I mean, like as herbalists, Steve and I are probably a bit more weird in some of the stuff we eat. We walked around the yard the other day and munched on some blue vervain flowers and some goldenrod flowers, and I think a variety, though, is really important. There are, 20,000 commonly edible vegetables and fruits in the world, and look at what you eat in a week. I bet the average person probably eats no more than 20 different vegetables or fruits in a week, or in their diet, period.
Yeah. Someone asked about coffee enemas. Thomas, what's your opinion of coffee enemas? I'd like to hear your opinion before I give mine.
Yeah, so coffee enemas offer the benefits of coffee, and coffee is a bitter cholagogue without the side effects of the caffeine, which I don't think would bother that many people. I think the average person could just drink a cup of coffee and save some hassle. I don't think that they're healthy, or any enema or colonic is healthy when done regularly, because you can, if you're doing these every day, wash out bacteria from your gut. But the occasional enema or coffee enema, I don't think is going to hurt you, and it might offer some benefit occasionally. I prefer to just, drink my cup of coffee.
I personally think that the use of coffee enemas originated back to Samuel Thompson, where he gave coffee enemas with composition tea to clear the bowel when people were acutely sick. But I think the biggest problem with it is because I've done enemas and I typically use some kind of herbal tea or solution in it, is that the recommendations is people do these like every day. And I think that's really bad. I think it's really unhealthy. I don't think it's a good thing to do. And I think that if you're actually wanting herbs that are going to actually help colon health, I think there's a lot better things to pick from than coffee. So someone said if someone was extremely sensitive to the master cleanse, that's the lemon and maple syrup, that's probably a problem with phase 2 detoxification, right? And I would say, yes, you're basically stirring up a lot of toxins in your body and you don't have enough nutrients to process them or get them out of the system. So it's a sign you need to get more nutrition into your body, and maybe more protein, more amino acids, more B vitamins, stuff like that. Okay, let's see. You said the name of the book too fast. Nourishing Traditions. That's Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon. Yes, lentils are a good uh, protein too. Okay. Uh, all right. I think we've answered most of the questions. Some people made some comments about banana peel as a rose fertilizer, which is interesting. Have we ever done a class on prostate problems? In my membership program next month with Tree of Light Publishing, which is we are talking about testosterone in problems like that with men. And someone mentioned that their face was fire engine red, and they started a yeast cleanse and got worse. Took an enema and it worked. Took one 5 hours ago. The heat is gone. Still itching. What else? I don't recommend yeast cleanses really, Thomas. First of all, I think that yeast is over-blamed for a lot of things that I don't really think are really yeast. Yeast candida is one of those like catch-all diagnoses that's just done because we don't know what's wrong with you, so you got yeast. Uh, I think there are some symptoms where people can have some yeast overgrowth after they've had a lot of antibiotics, if they're not eating a lot of fermented foods or getting probiotics in their system. And some people do have vaginal yeast infections and problems like that. But I just all too often see too many things blamed on yeast that I can see a lot of other explanations for. Any comments on that, Thomas?
I agree. I don't. That topic just aggravates the heck out of me. I don't even want to get started on it.
Okay. All right, everybody. We're a little over the time that we had, and so we don't have time to take any more questions. Thank you all for participating in tonight's webinar. Hope that you'll join us for our detoxification class, and where we can share some more of information like you heard tonight. Have a good evening, and we'll talk to you again on a future webinar.